Hello, and welcome to...
No. Did you say this was easier for a kid to upgrade?
Yes, it is.
Then let me do it.
It's all yours.
As my dad said in the previous video, these screws are ugly and do not match. So, we're going to replace them with black screws. We're going to use a screwdriver and not a drill because we don't want to strip the bolts. We're going to take out one screw and replace it with a different screw. If we take them all out at once though, then it's going to end up collapsing. Now to take them out and put them in. Now we're going to skip these two and do the bottom three, and I'll tell you later on why. Now for the last screw.
While Reagan's doing that, the reason we saved these last two on this side and that side is just because what actually holds the control panel in place. We're going to move all four, pull the control panel out, and then we can work on that joystick and the buttons. The joystick actually makes a pretty good handle to hold this up. Go ahead and take that. And when you pull the joystick up, the whole thing just slides right out. There's going to be, don't go too far. There's a couple connections in here. I'm going to show a close-up of it in a little bit and tell you which ones you have to remove. Now you can see the inside of the Arcade1up control panel. There's really only two things that we're going to disconnect. This one strip right here and the USB. Just give it a good squeeze and it comes right off. I don't know why this USB is so tight on here, and it actually gave me fits. So I'm going to unscrew these two and pull the whole thing off. If you can get yours off easy, cool. If not, unscrew is just fine. Do not lose these screws. You want them the exact length. If you get longer ones, you will poke through your control panel and it'll look horrible forever. That comes off. You can set both of those right inside. Again, do not lose these screws. A nice little trick is to put the screws right back where they started. They're not going to get that much in the way. Hand tighten them in there. They're not going anywhere. You'll have them when you need them.
Here's the control panel taken out and all the stuff we need to fix it.
Exactly, and we're going to start with the joystick, this nasty little thing right here. The one that I have ready to go, I already had in my box of ever needs. It's from Groovy Game Gear. It's their Zippy Fight Stick, and it's a really good, inexpensive, all-around good feel joystick. It is an 8-way, so it's going to work for all the games that we need. The one negative it has, and it's not its fault, is that its mounting plate is not the exact hole mount matchup that it is for the Arcade1up. All that means is that when I take this one off and put this in its place, I'm going to have to drill a couple pilot holes and screw it in on its own, creating a couple new holes. No big deal. We're going to use the exact same mounting screws, however. That way we know it won't go all the way through and wreck our plastic. And next up, we're going to change the buttons.
You only have 5 buttons.
And there's 7 of these. Good point. We're not going to switch out the 1 and 2 player because all they do is select 1, 2 player, bring up your pause screens. They're never affecting the game. They work fine for that. There's no reason to spend extra money and upgrade those buttons. The ones we are going to upgrade, we have the reverse button, which is right here. We have the hyperspace button, which is right here. We have the thrust and fire, which is right here, and the smart bomb. Some of you may know in the arcade, smart bomb was actually a green button, so I'm going green. It's going to look good in here and the way it should be. Some of you also might have noticed that some of these are different on the bottom. What we have here are leaf switches and micro switches. These work when you depress and it clicks a little bit on the inside and sends a signal. These work when this tiny little gap in between here gets closed and sends a signal. You barely have to move this and it sends it. So you can just do little taps over and over and over again. I went with leaf switches on the reverse, thrust, and fire because those are things you're going to be doing over and over and over again. And I went with the micro switches that we don't need as much sensitivity on the hyperspace and smart bomb, something you only use 3-5 times a game, and you just don't need it that much. This is going to save a little bit on the cost. I know it's only $1 or $2 here and there, but when you do a few of these in an arcade, it all adds up, and at Teaching Retro, we're all about saving a couple bucks.
And what are these wires for?
Alright, so these come from DIY Retro Arcade. They're a rather new company, and they have a whole section that specializes in Arcade1up improvements and parts. The original from the company connectors that go onto their push buttons are really, really thin. They are not going to connect to these micro switches or to these switches. You can see this is a little bit bigger. So when we take these wires that they come from DIY, they slide right on. And then they have the fittings already on them, so when you pull the old ones out, they snap into place, and you're good to go. There's going to be no soldering, there's going to be no trying to figure out where the wires go, and it makes it really, really simple. They're totally worth the price. They were a couple bucks a pop. They have gone up a little bit in price and spent on the website, but since I saved a little bit of money on the switches and not replacing the 1 and 2 players, I can put it right into that. Now it's time for disassembly. We're going to take this thing apart. I highly recommend you do each button one at a time. That way you're not going to have to worry about where it plugs into here. The wires themselves, there's a little mini zip tie. Very small, very tiny. You can see it right there. We're just going to snip that. Be very careful you don't snip the other wires. The joystick wires, the buttons that you are not going to change, they're still in there. So do your best MacGyver impersonation. Snip the tie without cutting any of the wires. You're done. Once that little mini zip tie is out of the way, you're going to find the wire. First we're going to do, just randomly pick whichever button you want. Follow the cord around where it goes down and it connects in. We're going to pull, you pull right on the edge of the wire where it connects in there, and it's going to give just a little resistance, and then it pops out. It's also connected by a little, I don't know if it's a little piece of rubber band or glue. Just pull and it'll break away too. Now, once that's done, you'll see that on the button itself, there's 2 little tabs. Squeeze those in and push, and that button will pop right out. It's done. If you want to use it for other projects, I don't know why, because it's not that good of a button, but if that's what you want to do, go ahead. And we're going to bring Reagan back in just a minute. We're going to show you how to put in another button.
We're going to do Smart Bomb first.
And we got all the push buttons from Paradise Arcade Controls. They are also a company I've worked with. I've built several custom units with these, and they are great. So you see Reagan's putting that into the slot. Flip it over. She's got a retainer ring that screws right on nice and easy. And she's going to get about as hand tight as you can. Now that Reagan's done hand tightening this, we want to make sure that it's positioned in a way so that when you put the micro switch on, it doesn't hit the side of the cabinet. Best way to do this, have it running alongside of the cabinet with the tall side facing away from the connection. That way the micro switch is going to face this direction and it's going to plug in just right with your wire. She's going to take this tool that I picked up from Groovy Game Gear, but you can get anywhere. Applying pressure on the bottom of the button, she's going to finish tightening that up. And that looks good. Now it's not going anywhere. It's nice and set and in place. And now while Reagan attaches that micro switch, I'm going to show you how easy it is. The micro switch itself has a high hole and a low hole. The button's going to go on the bottom side and the connectors are going to go on the top side. And each of these switches has a high and a low. This can only properly go on one way. You go on one on the angle, slide it down, snap it into place. She's already got it up and working. Now it's time for the wire. Reagan's going to take the connector and put it in the open space that we created when we pulled the last one out. It snaps right into place. There's ridges on one side and there's 2 little grooves on the actual place where you're connecting it. It can only go in one way and snap in place. Now she's going to connect the micro switches. While she's doing that, I will show you on the micro switch you have 3 pieces. I like to do the white wire on top, but it doesn't really matter. On the very top one, you're going to install the white wire. It slides right into place. Then, the middle one, the blue wire slides right on place. As you can see, Reagan's already done it in less time than it took me to tell you about it. That is exactly how it's supposed to look. And we flip it over, and we've got our green button in place. Nice and easy and usable. Alright, we're going to do that to each and every one of these buttons. No reason for you to have to sit and live through that. After we get done swapping them all out, we're going to tackle this joystick. So I'm done with the buttons. It only took me a few more minutes and it looks pretty good. You can feel the difference between the micro switch and There's just a little bit of push on those leaf switches. You still get a nice click, and you can tell they're built for speed and accuracy. Full disclosure, a couple of these buttons aren't quite what I said they were going to be, so I wanted to go over them in a little bit of a close-up. This is the fire. This is the thrust. You'll notice that they are pretty tight in there. These leaf switches do take up quite a bit of space. I could not go down on this leaf switch or out because of the USB and because this is where the front wall of the cabinet is going to be. This is more of an open space, so you can go all the way flush right here because inside the cabinet it's empty forward. So they do fit in there just right. This one also fits in there just right. The wires are a mess, but when you kind of get them all together and get it all nice and tight, do a little mini zip tie on there, it's going to work perfectly. For now, I'm not doing that because I want more range of motion when I take on this joystick. I've unscrewed the joystick, taken it out of its place. I'm just going to set it aside on the table. It can sit there. It's not going to hurt anything. I've also taken my new joystick, removed the mounting plate, set that aside. Now, making sure that you do this the correct side. Flat can be little indentations up. Set that so it's over the hole, exactly centered. Get it just right. Make sure that this line and this line are perpendicular, otherwise when you use the joystick it's going to be a little off. When you have that exactly where you want it, and knowing that a millimeter or two here and there is not going to make a difference when you're cranking away at playing Defender, hold it down and we're going to drill pilot holes. Now that I've finished, pull out. You see they're just tiny little indentations. I went with the 2 solid circles and the 2 long ovals. These solid circles are going to give me exact placement. The ovals are going to help hold it down and not let it move around. So we clear the area, put it back where you need it. I recommend using the screwdriver instead of the drill because again, you're working a little bit delicate here. Now we reverse and pull them out. Now our holes are set. We are going to mount this back onto the plate. We are going to put it back on here, screw it in, and then we'll start working on the wires. I'm all done. It's in place, nice and tight, looks good. This moves around, nothing moves, so we're good to go. The last piece here is to remove the wires and put them on here. Arcade1up has also been nice enough to put an arrow here. When this is in place, the arrow faces this direction. So if you ever kind of get lost or forget what goes where, just remember where the arrow goes. That's how it's set up. If you take a picture before you start it all, or even at this point, you'll also be able to remind yourself and see what it looks like. I'm not going to put you through the hassle of watching me solder anything. I'm not that good at it, and it would be pretty much a nightmare. We're done. We've got everything in place so it looks nice. The buttons are all working well. All the wires are connected. Everything's soldered to this, so it's even working just right. Then I went ahead and took them all. One little zip tie holds them all in place. Not only does it look better, keeps it organized, but also if any of the wires start to float forward or backward too far, when you go to put this into place, they're going to get caught and either stick out or damage them. Before we can let Reagan do the last step of putting the bolts in, we need to attach this, otherwise it's not going to work. So you have the exact reverse order. You put your main cord right here, and then we are going to put the USB piece right back into place using the screws I told you to save earlier.
Now time to screw the last 4 nails in.
One thing I brought up in the last video I said I was going to talk about, but I haven't yet, is this plexiglass cover. I went ahead and loosened these 2 screws, flattened it out, tightened it back up, and it is flush. It's just the way it should be. As a matter of fact, this whole thing is the way it should be. We love it. We're going to get a lot of enjoyment out of it. Hopefully you like this video, and you'll tune in again in a couple weeks when we have the next one.
And now to play some Defender in the arcade.